잠시 후 11시 30분부터 본 행사.
From 11:30, we will begin today's session. Those of you who are outside, we are about to begin, so please come in and take your seats. Thank you.
네, 그러면은 이제 시간이 되었기 때문에
It is now time to begin this session. So, first of all, I would like to thank you for coming to this session, which is organized by Korea Institute of Public Administration. My name is Lee Do-seok, and I will be leading you through today's program. Thank you for coming. And this is session 1. And the topic is, why is strengthening capabilities of public servants in development cooperation important? And so, first of all, I would like to introduce today's presenters and speakers. First of all, we have President Sang-han Choi of KIPA. And we have the moderator for this session, President Yoon-won Hwang of Chungwon University. Also, we have participants of the round table. So, Mr. Sun Taek-hang, who is the former ambassador of RK to Rwanda, and Mr. Lee Ryun-ju, who is former Deputy Minister for Regulatory Reform Office of the Office for Government Policy Coordination. And former Vice President of KOICA, we have Mr. Hyun-sik Chang. And last but not least, we have Professor Tae-gyun Kim from Seoul National University. So before we begin the round table, I would like to invite President Sang-han Choi for his opening remarks. Let's welcome him with a big hand. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sang-han Choi. I'm president of the Korea Institute of Public Administration, KIPA. I was not fully aware of the importance of this session. because KIPA was supposed to share the achievements of past projects, and that's what I thought this session was about. However, I found out later that we are holding the Development Cooperation Week this week, and in line with that, we're holding the 2023 Global Korea Forum.
뿐만 아니라
And so the Office for Government Policy Coordination is involved, and also we have many other very important public organizations that are involved in this huge event. And today, KIPA will be carrying out two sessions, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The first session is on strengthening capabilities of public servants. Why is this important in development cooperation important? And the moderator for this session will be President Yoon Won-hwang, and we will have in the round table the former ambassador Hwang Sun-taek of Rwanda, and also former Vice President of KOICA, Mr. Hyun-sik Chang, and also former Deputy Minister, Mr. Ryun-ju Lee, and also Professor Taekyun Kim, who will contribute to the round table. So, in Southeast Asia, Uzbekistan, and Mongolia, I have worked on public servant capability strengthening projects and training and education as a member of KIPA. Now, Mongolia and Uzbekistan, I have visited each country about 5 times. And the head of an organization visiting a specific country more than 3 times, I think that does not happen often. And the reason I visited these countries several times is because I felt that I needed to focus and concentrate on specific nations. The Prime Minister of Mongolia and also the high-level officials of Uzbekistan. When I met with these people, they made some comments about Korea. They often say that ROK was successful in economic development and achieving democracy in this region. And of course, we have Japan and Singapore. However, Korea is quite different, and these countries are very much interested in our success. And also, these countries are very much interested in strengthening capabilities of public servants, and they are interested in cooperation and support. Recently, I met the Prime Minister of Mongolia, and this is what he said. He went to Washington, D.C. and met President Biden. And President Biden at that time unofficially asked the following question: Prime Minister, between Korea and Japan, which do you like better? And the Prime Minister of Mongolia answered, well, for economic aid, actually, we're getting more aid from Japan compared to Korea. It's incomparable. However, Korea is a brother country to us. They are our neighboring country. That was his answer. When I meet public servants of Uzbekistan, well, actually, we have to fly 7 hours to go to Uzbekistan. It's quite far away. And also, we have representative from Kazakhstan here, and they have used the Silk Road. There was exchange back in the 6th century to the 12th century with Korea. So people in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, they know that we had countries like Goguryeo and Pare, but they do not know about Silla because Silla engaged in marine trade. However, they are familiar with Pare and Goguryeo because they traded 1,500 years ago via the Silk Road. And so there was trade with the Central Asian countries and Korea from long time ago. And we have to think about the future direction of KIPA. these developing nations are asking us for ODA, but we do not have abundant resources, so we have to find smarter ways of delivering the smart models that we have in Korea to these developing nations in order to help them. And by teaching them about the methods that we have, I believe that there will be further development in these nations. And so we have Deputy Chairman from Kazakhstan, and I'm going to have a one-to-one meeting with him later this afternoon. I would like to have the opportunity to visit Kazakhstan in the future and to discuss further ways of cooperation and seek ways to strengthen capabilities of public servants in Kazakhstan. So we do have advanced models in Korea, but we have not only success stories, but we also have lessons learned from our failure as well. And as for President Hwang, he is former president of KIPA, so he is well versed in think tanks, and he is president of Chungwon University, and I'm sure he will be using his experience as a stepping stone to make further advancements in the future. So I want to thank all the contributors, and I also want to thank all the participants. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before we start the round table, we need to clear out the stage. We also have a group photo session for all the participants for session 1 and session 2. So please come to the stage for a group photo. Thank you very much.
We're gonna take a photo before we start the first session. So please, all participants, please into the front. 원장님 뒤에 뒤로. 네, 소장님 예, 약간 사이사이에. 예. 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 오케이. 내가 좀 보시겠어. 예. 잠깐만. 예. 네, 감사합니다. We will spend 2 or 3 minutes for the resetting the chair in front of the stage. So please wait for the setting up the stage. 자리가 좀 자, 그러면
And now we will begin our first session. I will pass my microphone to President Hwang to moderate this session. Ladies and gentlemen, I am President Hwang of Chungwon University. I have been a moderator for many sessions, but it's very rare to see that a brochure with so many blanks. Many wonder what we are going to talk about. Today, we are going to talk about strengthening capabilities of public servants in the development cooperation area.
You will be interpreted by okay, I'm sorry. 그래서
So how are we going to strengthen public servant capabilities? This is the subject of today's session. Why is it important in development cooperation that we prioritize public servants' capabilities? There are 4 questions that I want to address, and we are going to take a format in terms of answering these 4 questions with the panelists. So, by listening to the round table, you probably understand why that we don't need any presentation materials. Before we start, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have former Ambassador Sun Taek-hwang of the Republic of Korea to Rwanda on my right. Former Ambassador Hwang worked as a diplomat and worked in Rwanda as a former ambassador and made a huge contribution in international cooperation. When he was young, he worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the development cooperation area. I think he will provide very fruitful information to this session. On my left, we have Ryunju Lee. Some may think that by the name it's a female, but we have a very masculine Mr. Lee here. I was very surprised to see him in person because I thought by the name he was a female. Mr. Lee worked as a former Deputy Minister for Regulatory Reform Office of the Office for Government Policy Coordination. He held various positions in this office, and now he is a visiting research fellow in KIPA. When we had the headquarters for development cooperation, he was the head of this office, and we have about 6.5 trillion won of budget for the development or aid, which is twofold increase from this year for next year's budget. So we have Mr. Ryunju Lee. Please give him a big round of applause. I am going to introduce Professor Kim at the last because he's the youngest. We have former Vice President Hyun-sik Jang of KOICA. So in the businesses of ODA, probably people have heard of his name. Without mentioning his name, we cannot talk about businesses of Koika. 20 years ago, when I was at the KIPA, former Vice President Han-Sik Jang had a very bright future. He was an excellent expert in this area. We have Mr. Jang with us today. Last but not least, who we have Professor Tae-gyun Kim, who has very bright future ahead of us. In the area of international cooperation, Professor Kim is making a huge contribution in this area. This session, hosted by the Office for Government Policy Coordination, we have Professor Kim attending other sessions for this forum as well. So we have Professor Tae-gyun Kim. So we have 4 experts on the stage and listen to their opinions. So why is strengthening capabilities of public servants important in the area of development cooperation? So when we had a war, we received lots of training from universities in the States, where we went for about 1 to 3 months training for public servants capacity building. However, there was a language barrier, so we had a public administration graduate school of Seoul National University, and they went to the States for the training where they have learned the theories, and then they came back to Korea to train excellent public servants. So you probably know, for example, Park Dong-seok, Jo Seok, who are the first generation of our experts in the area of strengthening capacities of public servants in Korea, where they have gained lots of experiences and training in the States. So public servants play a pivotal role in the development of one's country, especially in developing countries. The role and the capacities of public servants are very important. This is why we in the KIPA takes this subject as our main research agenda as well. Up till now, we have many projects for international development cooperation. It is to expand the influence of our countries, which is one side of the argument for development cooperation. So this is for the benefits of our country, but in a bigger scale, Korea too is making and has to make a bigger role in achieving, for example, SDG. So not just doing the benefits for the country, but also contributing to global issues such as human rights, mitigating wars, are the global challenges where countries like Korea can be involved. So what directions have we taken so far, and how are we going to do to achieve both in this area? So we would like to hear from our experts. So why don't we begin with former Ambassador Hwang? Thank you for your kind words. I'm sure Mr. Zhang probably can give us a better introduction because he has worked in KOICA for a long time, but I had the microphone before him. But like our president said, the ODA projects are done for the benefits for a country and also to achieve SDG goals. So we cannot exclude these two sides of the coin for ODA businesses. And of course, ODA businesses done through the tax money from our people. Nevertheless, the pure object of ODA businesses need to be well implemented. In the past, countries like Japan were criticized because whilst they were doing the ODA business, Japan was seeking for their national benefit. So they were actually pouring money, but criticized a lot. Korea wasn't affluent country in the past, and because we are using our people's tax for the budget for the ODA, the ratio of aid or the target or recipient countries of the ODA are concentrated in Asia, and about 25% are African countries. So we need to allocate right budget for recipient countries that suit our needs as well. In this respect, there are two sides of the coin for sure. Under these circumstances, then how should we go forward? We need to have both preemptive and advanced strategies. In terms of preemptive aid, we need to increase the volume of aid. For example, Korea, since 2 years ago, compared to the per GNI, it was about 0.01%. With the new administration, if we look at this year's budget and also next year's budget, the volume of aid is about 0.3%. This year is about 0.2% of GNI, and there is going to be an exponential increase for the budget for the next year. So I think we are reaching almost the average. And also, the recommendation by the UN is about 0.7%. So we need to constantly increase the volume of ODA. When I say preemptive measures, for allocation is also important. We still have for beneficial ones is for above 40%, and for advanced countries, we need to actually strengthen to make sure that some aid can be provided for free. We have lots of stakeholders involved, so this cannot be achieved overnight. But we need to go towards a direction where we can have a more advanced form of aid. I would like to add an extra comment for strategy-wise. This year, this year was around 3 trillion billion, but next year the budget will be increased to about 4 trillion won, 4.7, or it could be increased to 6 trillion. So there is a significant increase. Then how are we going to strategically use the increased budget for the aid? So we need to have a constant monitoring and review of ODA businesses, but if there is a significant and surprise increase in the budget, maybe the actual agencies who carry out ODA business may not take the whole business well if there is a sudden kind of increase in the budget. So we need to make sure that our taxpayers' money are spent well. Such 30 to 40% of increase in the budget is a lot, and for the agencies who are carrying out the ODA businesses, they need to manage this well. But this is very challenging for these agencies to carry out these responsibilities. So what I want to recommend is that when they are going to increase a budget, they need to do a feasibility study and constant monitoring of the businesses so that the budget can be efficiently and strategically used.
So I have some additional comments, but I think we should hear from the other panelists first. Yes, in the long term, well, we have to think about the basic tone of ROK's ODA. So in the case of Japan, they only sought their national interest, and the end was not very good. And of course, we have this huge increase in the budget. So I think we have ample volume. So we have quantity. However, in the future, we have to work on the quality of our ODA. So thank you very much for those comments. And so, Mr. Lee, would you like to speak next? Well, in the case of Korea, well, let's think about our future direction of ODA. Now, I used to work as team head of the ODA in the Prime Minister's office, so I would like to talk about my experience. Now, as for the direction that we should seek in terms of ODA, well, we have to do it well. What do I mean by that? Now, we have the recipient countries or the partnering countries, and from their perspective, let's say we are building a hospital for them. But it's not just Korea that's going to build a hospital. Other countries are going to build hospitals as well. So we must do a great job. In other words, we have the partnering country and they are interested in numerous projects, and we must select projects that we can do well. And so Korea, we have our own strengths and we have to build on those strengths. And we have experience of coming out of poverty and becoming a developing nation. And we must have that same perspective as we engage in ODA projects overseas. By doing that, we will stand out. We will be cost efficient. And we will be successful. And in more detail, let's say we engage in a same project, but if we focus on a project where we have strengths, for example, we can think about the 새마을 movement, New Village movement, or IT projects would be some good examples. And of course, we have tax systems and voting. These are experiences that we have at the government level, and we have ample experience in implementing these systems. And those are the type of ODA projects that we should be carrying out. So we should base everything on our past experience. And secondly, we talked about foreign diplomacy and national interest. And of course, ODA is connected tightly with these concepts. However, are we going to seek short-term results, or are we going to think about our national interest in the long term? Now, when it comes to ODA, we are providing something to these recipient countries, but we should not ask for something back right away. We should think in the long term. So we must have the perspective and think that these partnering countries will be giving something back to us in the very far future. And I think three things are important in ODA projects. First, we have to think about the right level of support befitting the level of the recipient country. Should we give them cutting edge technology? I have some doubts about that. For example, in Korea, we have lines that were used in order to plant rice plants in the rice field. And we also had harvesting machines, and these harvesting machines are rather obsolete and no longer used in Korea, but such simple technology will go a long way in some African countries, for example. And secondly, we must carry out ODA projects that provide hope and motivation. So in Africa, malaria is a huge problem. And if we provide mosquito nets to these countries, well, then the African nations will not develop their own technology and company for producing mosquito nets. So what we need to do is provide these countries with hope and motivation, not material goods. And I think a very good example here that applies would be the 새마을 운동, 새마을 movement. And also sustainability of projects are important. And so if we do not have follow-up service, then it will not provide real help to the partnering countries. And so these projects must be sustainable, and we must provide hope and motivation to the partnering countries. And the foundation for all these efforts must be our past experience. We must provide something that is unique to Korea. We must provide something that only Korea can provide to these partnering nations. And we must think in the midterm and long term and not seek just the immediate results that will come from the partnering nations. Yes, thank you very much. So what Mr. Lee has said is that we must think about the basic tone of the ROK's ODA. And so we must kill two birds with one stone. And having said that, we need to implement these projects that are actually helpful to the recipient countries. And as a donor, we must focus on our strength. We must focus on the competitive edge and strength that we have. And you mentioned IT projects and the 새마을 movement. Also, more specifically, we must work at the level of the recipient nations. And of course, we talked about the harvesting machine that uses bicycles, and also a guideline for settling out rice in the paddy fields were mentioned. And I'm sure there are some people in the audience who are unfamiliar with these obsolete agricultural technologies. And the rice harvesting machine were attached to bicycles. So you would pedal in order to get the individual rice grains. And such technology, it's old technology for Korea, but such technology could be very helpful technology to the partnering countries. And rather than building a new building for these countries, it's actually better in order to teach the partnering countries to teach them how to build a building. So that will be more sustainable. And then, yes, Mr. Chang, sorry for calling out the wrong name. I have a friend with a similar name. But anyhow, yes, I am Hyun-sik Chang, that's my name. And we heard from two panelists. And actually, they stole my thunder. They said everything that I already prepared. And so I was a member of the first wave of recruits of KOICA. So I was at KOICA from the very beginning. And so let me briefly talk about my experience at KOICA. And so SDG and national interest, we must seek both. And so we have to kill two birds with one stone. And Yes, this question was asked to us. But I want to say that SDGs are actually directly in line with national interests because SDGs, we must achieve these goals by 2030. And it has been decided by the UN. It's not something that you can choose not to achieve. And so, aside from the national interests, our national interests, we must achieve the SDGs. And Mr. Hwang briefly mentioned, how do we define national interests? Of course, we can think in the short term, we can think in the midterm and long term. And in my opinion, I think when it comes to national interests, we have to think in the mid and long term. And recently, we have to consider economic interests in addition to the midterm and long-term goals because ODA, we're doing it with taxpayers' money. And so when it comes to national interest, we cannot just think about economic gains, but that is a factor to consider as well. So we have SDG that's in line with the national interest. So that was one point that I wanted to make. And secondly, Korea's ODA, I think it is now gaining great momentum. What I mean is I joined KOICA in 1991. And at that time, the size of ODA was not that big. And at that time, the budget of KOICA was 19 billion won. However, next year KOICA's budget is 2 trillion plus. And when I first joined KOICA, there were 2 overseas offices. Now there are 45. What does this mean? It means that we have firm commitment of the ROK for or towards ODA. And so we have firm commitment of the government, and also the Korean people are interested in providing ODA to others. And then if we can work with the partnering countries, then I believe that Korea is in a very good condition to lead in this area in the future. So when I joined KOICA in 1991, I had some doubts, and many people had doubts about doing ODA. However, now we had the announcement of the MDGs, and then we had the SDGs announced, and of course, former Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, came up with the SDGs and declared them. And so when it comes to ODA, I believe that we are in a very good position to be in the lead. And as for the SDG, that's the future direction that we need to take. And it is, I believe, it is 100% in line with our national interests. Yes, thank you very much. And so I think I asked the wrong question. I asked you to choose between SDG and national interest, but your wise answer was that they are actually 100% in sync and in line. So if we go after the SDGs, then actually we will be achieving national interests. Yes, in spite of this concept, well, you may think that we might have to put slightly more priority on one over the other. If we have to make that choice, then should we change our ODA tone? So Professor Kim, would you like to comment on that? Well, yes, thank you. I wanted to say that I agreed with everything that has been said, but I think you have now twisted the question. So let me try to address that. So thank you very much for the invite. And this is like the Davos Forum. The format is same. And I see the other panelists are quite distinguished. So it's an honor for me to be here. So I agree with what has already been said, but I would just like to add some additional comments, including what Mr. Hwang has said. So first of all, we have national interest, and then of course we have ODA, but I think we need to think about international cooperation in a broader sense. So is there a conflict, or can all these things go hand in hand? So I think we thought about this issue from the very beginning. So it's not a new issue, but there are some sensitive aspects. We have the third basic plan, and we're thinking about win-win strategy with the partnering countries. And we're also thinking about universal values and the values and the benefits that can be provided to the Korean society. And we talk about national interests as well in this strategy. And the national interests in the basic strategy, the definition is not narrow. I think it's quite broad. And we have problems that are shared by the global community. And if we work on that, in the long term, it will work for our national interests. And as Mr. Chang has said, yes, SDGs are national interests. They are quite same. Now, we have to think about how we will be in the lead in the ODA area and international cooperation area, because that will be for the enhancement of our national interests. And we worked on international cooperation, and there was a lot of discourse provided to us by the global community, and we were just followers of such discourse. But now I think we are in a position to be in the lead.
We have the rise of China, and we also call Global South, Global North, which are the two clusters need to be connected, and which country can link these two clusters. Maybe in a broader sense, Korea can play that role via international cooperation, because it is about universal values and also realizing national interests as well. And many people have mentioned that we have become a from developing country to advanced country, and we are the only country who did that. So by sharing the experiences from these two periods, I believe we can lead the discourse in the development of our aid. And just to add a comment, there was a Camp David summit among Korea, Japan, and the US, and also another policy dialogue in Hawaii. So these trilateral cooperation are linked with many other kind of cooperations too, but the first comes in mind is international development cooperation. Politically speaking, this could be less sensitive, and also via track 2, this could be a very easy and convenient tool to achieve cooperation among these countries. And this is also in part of Inti strategy as well, and also checking the power of China, but at the same time rising together with China. So this goes in line with national interests. Just two more cases. Northern European countries are probably the best practices for ODA. They go by multilateral framework. They have the perfect standards. And they seem like they are the answer. And do they not take their national interests? No, because we are the followers. And because Northern European countries, they meet the 0.7% of the needs for the ODA aid. So maybe this is very important in terms of mid to long-term strategy, where they are making their country's image better and improving their national image. By doing that, they are taking care of their national interests. Are we going to utilize ODA to incorporate and use national interests? If you look at Japan, they have the concessional loan of 60%, and the budget is actually bigger than what they have invested, and the return is bigger than what they have invested. Probably that is why they are being criticized, but on the other hand, they did their business well in ODA projects. So personally, the answer to this question, which direction and which issues are Korea is going to take and prioritize these issues, and with the increased budget, which direction are we going to take? Through discussions, I think we need to have a right discussion to be continuously happening. Thank you very much for your opinions. I ask you to choose, and you actually didn't make the choice. You mentioned win-win strategy, universal values, and the role of Korea in the global stage. And from the long-term perspective, maybe we can do like an investment like what Japan has done. So if we can realize, or if we can improve our national image, we can certainly improve our national reputation on the global stage. That's, I think, the comment from Mr. Zhang. When I went to the States in the past, many senior Americans told me stories about their experiences and their work experiences in Korea. But when I visited States 10 years ago, I could definitely feel that the impression of Korea has changed so much. For example, we have so many Samsung and LG electronic products, which are probably at the very front of, for example, in the market. And now we have become a donor country where we can take a pride of. And Mr. Zhang said that SDG equals a national interest, and also it is a win-win strategy. So our direction at the end can take these both and have a synergy effect. Probably there could be a potential conclusion we can reach. Since this session is organized by KIPA, I would like to take the flow of this discussion to understand the kind of basic direction of ODA. And now I want to talk about public service part in particular in the development cooperation area. So what kind of project should we take in this field? In public service sector, there are many projects that we are doing, which is strengthening the capabilities of public servants. So if we look at the topic, it is why is strengthening capabilities of public servants important? So now let's touch on this topic. When we talk about strengthening capabilities of public servants, it's about recipient countries' public servants, where they need more information to do their administrative work. And how are they going to learn this information? Up till now, this capacity building was about inviting these public servants to our country to provide 1 or 2 month training where they visit various government agencies. So we have various projects, but is this lecture-oriented approach right? Or on-site visit, cultural exchanges are right? Are there any kind of bilateral ways to do so? Up till now, capacity building of public servants of developing countries, we can do an evaluation on these projects. So have we done enough? Is quality okay? Have we achieved the initial objective? If there were challenges, what were they? How can we make improvement? Maybe we can start from Professor Kim this time. Thank you very much. I think probably this is my weakest area because I don't have much experience in capacity building of public servants. But I'll make a brief start, and that will be great that other experts can fill in. Like President Huang said, from my experience, we have been supported by COICA in our graduate school, where we do the master program for public servants of developing countries. And when we talk to professors in our graduate school, we talk about sustainability, and sustainability is not enough. The reason is that because we do this every 3 years to recruit these students, and every time the themes change, which means that, for example, for public administration graduate school, we obviously specialize in public service sector where there is a continuity. But if we look at in terms of nationwide, it's just a one case. And we have to change the subjects every 3 years. For example, if we have done capacity building in Africa, we have changed to gender and others. So every 3 years, the subject change. So when they go back to their own countries, they do various activities. And there is kind of a lack of connectivity to manage our alumni of these courses. So there isn't any system in place to manage these personnel when they go back to their countries. And what President Huang also said is that because we normally invite public servants to Korea to provide training, and one of professors that I know said that capacity building 2.0, but this is not just about inviting them to our country. We actually need to visit their countries too. For example, let's have a partner institution in Malaysia, and then we do the training in that institution, and probably from other countries can come to Malaysia to receive training. We could probably act as a hub and have a partner institution, and through that partner institution we can expand local network and provide education training, and also we can see the actual sites by visiting those countries. I think this is probably something that we need to consider. So by doing that, this is some bilateral ways to do so. And if we are going to do in terms of bilateral way, maybe we can build a consortium. Not just we have so many players, actors coming in. I think we need to have a central agency to control this. Maybe the KIPA can create a consortium, and through this consortium, and we could have a hub in Southeast Asia, from Latin America, where they could act as a controller, as a manager. Probably a domestic institution can take that role, and probably the KIPA is more suitable to take this role. Last comment I would like to make is that many developing countries want to learn from Korea. The subject they want to learn is, for example, e-governance and democracy experience and economic development. But democratization is actually a very sensitive topic. So this is something that we couldn't really provide much training. And there are institutions in the States called National Endowment, and we are receiving requests from this institution, and we have the EAI who have received this request and conducted the knowledge sharing program to share democratization experience. And I think this could be linked to capacity building of public servants. So from the subject we have been focusing on, for example, economic development and public administration part, we can probably add in some political parts, for example, the democratization history of Korea, where we can expand on these subjects. Thank you very much for your comment. And you mentioned that you weren't knowledgeable in this area, but you have an ample knowledge in this field. But the core message, I think, is that, and you also have made suggestions, not just inviting these public servants from developing countries, but we can also go to their countries to provide training there as well. And also we can probably establish a consortium where the KIPA could be act as a central role. Because we don't have much time, I would like to ask our panelists to keep it short. And I would like to pass the microphone to Mr. Zhang. I will keep it short as possible. When I first joined KOICA conducted public administration, which is now known as capacity building for public servants. After 30 years, there are about 150,000 public servants who have received training from this program, and these alumni of these programs have now become ministers and appointed as high-level officials. What I want to say is that what they have learned in Korea, efficient and effective, out of many projects carried out by KOICA, I am very proud of this capacity building programs. And I was actually a director in charge of managing these training programs. And I put a lot of efforts to improve the quality of these training programs.
So for KOICA, these training programs are quite important. And of these numerous training programs, the training programs for the public servants are of utmost importance. So this area is quite important. We plan to continue these programs. And as Professor Kim has said, when it comes to sustainability, I think KOICA is thinking hard about achieving sustainability. And recently, because of numerous requests, we carry out training for the overseas public servants, and I personally give a lot of talks as well. So I think we will be seeing some changes here. So in the past, the training period was for 1 year only, but now we want continuity, so we're thinking of 3-year, even 5-year programs. Also, for year 1 and year 2, they will come to Korea and get training. And then the 3rd year training will happen in the partnering country at site. And so everything will be focused on the actual site. And as for these training programs and projects, yes, they are quite important. But when it comes to public administration, this area itself is very, very important. And of course, we have 17 SDGs, and goal 16 has to do with governance. And without enhancing the governance of the partnering nations, we can give them huge amounts of aid, but it will not be very helpful without that governance piece in place. And what is the role of KIPA in all this? I think that question will come up in the future, and I would like to answer that question when that question is asked by the moderator. And all the alumni of the program, they were quite happy with our public administration training programs, and I believe that Korea has strength and competitive edge in this area. Yes, thank you very much. And so you have direct experience of having overseen and supervised the program, and you said that you were very proud of it and you were very happy about the results and achievements. And yes, I agree. I can relate to that because I often give talks, special lectures as part of these training programs and other training programs as well. And we have civil servants working in Korea, and they are trained by different Korean institutes. And in the case of Singapore and Malaysia, the most powerful alumni is the COTI alumni. COTI is the Central Officials Training Institute, and the name has been changed. But anyway, COTI was a Korean training agency. And yes, the most powerful alumni in Singapore are the alumni of this Korean agency's training program. So yes, it was mentioned that 150,000 foreign public servants came to Korea to receive training. And I know that we have some problems that we need to iron out, but still, I think Korea has a very great program in training these overseas public servants. And I think we have private universities are bidding for the project as well, such as Kyunghee University. Okay, so you have been in public office, so would you like to comment? Well, in fact, if we think about strengthening capabilities of public servants in developing nations, well, we have experience of having been a recipient and now being a donor, and we know that the capability of the public servants is a basic building block of everything. And when it comes to strengthening capabilities, well, the capabilities can be strengthened through numerous programs. But in most cases, well, what we do is we mainly invite overseas public servants to come to Korea and provide training. And then there is training on the job as well. Now, I want to point out that strengthening capabilities, it will not happen overnight. And strengthening capabilities of a handful of people, that will not be very helpful either. However, we cannot invite all the overseas public servants from overseas and train them for a very long, extended period of time. So I think one method that we can employ is perhaps we can work with a local university in the partnering country and establish a training center at that local university and have an institute on a permanent basis. Now, how would that be meaningful? We have different partnering nations. We can select the best university in that country, and we can think of scholarship programs. Also, we will have professors of these universities, and they can participate. The professors can participate in the evaluation of the Korean ODA projects. So we can utilize the students and also the professors at the local universities. So we will be making better use of the local resources, and we can establish that permanent center that trains the local public servants. And by doing that, I think we will have much achievement and much results. And the current training programs for public servants, well, we do have some programs in place, but in order for these programs to be more sustainable, perhaps we can work with the local universities in the partnering nations. Yes, that's great. So, yes, we can have training programs in Korea, but then we can work with education institutes in the partnering nations, and that will help us disseminate the capability and knowledge. Yes, regarding the first question, well, I went first, so I had a lot to say. Now I'm going last, and so yes, I'm at a disadvantage. So first of all, when we carry out ODA projects, well, we talk about two things. One, is it state-led or is it market-led? So that's one basic question that we often ask. So is the ODA project going to be state-led, or are we going to have the market be in the lead? And so we continue to have that debate. And in relation to that, even now, according to what I experienced, in the case of developing nations, well, the capability of the private sector is not very advanced. Of course, the situation is not bad in Kazakhstan. It's quite advanced, the private sector. However, there are countries where the private sector lacks capability. So when it comes to public administration, and when we think about the importance of public administration, we cannot underestimate it. And if we look at the ODA areas, the public administration area, we are supporting about 8% of our budget. So most of it would go to transportation. That's 13%. So in terms of quantity, yes, we're not investing the most in terms of public administration. However, the support is quite substantial. And as I said before, we have strength in public administration, and it is indeed an area where the recipient countries need our support. And when it comes to quality, well, many people have said this already, but there are some challenges here because many of these projects just end as a one-time event. It's a one-time training session, and then it doesn't go any further than that. And to address this, I think the Korean government is thinking about how to improve this. And the one strength that Korea has in terms of public administration has to do with tariff administration and also elections and also digital government. So Korea has strengths in these areas. And on these fronts, we can provide consulting about the local current status in the partnering nations. And depending on the diagnosis, we can provide ECF funds or we can provide some sort of system to provide support. And as these systems are operated, well, we can work on maintenance or we can work on training of the employees so that these projects will not end as a one-time project, and it will not benefit just a handful of people. We must work on the entire system of the partnering nations and develop their system. And by doing that, I believe that there will be some midterm and long-term results, and KIPA can play a quite important role as well. So I think that's the direction we should take. We should be more systematic. We should not be focusing on individual people, but we should be focusing rather on the entire system. So those are my thoughts. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So anyhow, we talked about quality improvement. And these training programs should not be a one-time event. We need to think in the midterm and long term they should be sustainable programs. And also, we need to think about how we can have maximum effect in the partnering nations. So we should work on our training programs. And so we should provide after-sales service, or we should provide maintenance or follow-up, in other words. So yes, a very valid point. Thank you. And in the beginning, I thought I would be covering 4 questions. And as the first question was the basic tone for ODA, and the second question was the project on strengthening capabilities of public servants. And then we focused our discussions on the training that happens in Korea, and many of you provided comments about this. They're often one-time events. And my third question was about these training programs, but I think this issue was already addressed as part of answers to the second question. So I think we can go on. Now we have these training programs, and these trainings, they should not be just lectures and presentations. There should be cultural field visits, and there should be visits to administration offices. And of course, there would be lecturing days, but our trainees can go to POSCO, or they could go to Gyeongju, a historic city. And so this is the type of training program that is carried out by KOICA, but usually these programs seem to be all the same. So usually it's mostly lecture plus some cultural trips. However, I think we should do something more tactical. So maybe we can go to a Korean wrestling game or a soccer game, for example. So in France, well, last summer I gave a lecture to about 100 students of a sports program in France, and they actually loved not the lectures, but we had them play soccer games, and we had them play Korean wrestling and horse riding and swimming, and they really loved it. And Chungwon University, actually we are stationed in China, and we have golf courses and we have horse tracks as well, and we have 8-lane 50-meter swimming pool as well. So we utilize these facilities, and the students loved it.
하고 싶어 하는데
So they want to come again, but training foreign public servants, maybe there could be a different idea of training these public servants. If there are any, please share your opinions. So now I'm the first take. So from your question, rather than giving you a direct answer, what I have emphasized before is that rather than individual-based training, maybe we could have a systemic approach where we can transfer our strength in public administration to these partnering recipient countries. Nevertheless, there is a reality. And in Korean, there is a old saying that seeing is believing. So when we invite overseas public service, of course there are advantages and there are definitely needs for it. And KOICA has been doing these projects and making a huge contribution. We are very well aware of this. And within this scope, how can we make an improvement? Maybe that's the area where we can think harder. When I was an ambassador in Rwanda, and when I look at the structure of the government, most African countries, the ministers have very huge influence. And also, they have received education in European countries due to language and geographical proximity. And there was an instance where an official from Rwanda studied in Korea, and he's now a minister back in Rwanda. So out of many short-term training programs, how can we make these programs long-term where we could provide proper education and build the actual competencies of these public servants, and then where they can be appointed as ministers when they go back to their countries. So we could probably have a more systematic approach and provide kind of aftercare service after the training program too. Thank you very much for your comment. So making a long-term training project, training programs, and also providing aftercare too was the suggestion. So inviting public servants to Korea for the training, this has to be very short period of time, and it has to be one-time occasion. And I think itself, the program itself is meaningful, because when they visit Korea for these training programs, rather than listening to lectures, the on-site visits are far more effective. And like I have said before, we could utilize hub universities to provide more in-depth knowledge, where we could probably have more mutual connectivity between our country and the partnering countries. Another thing is that when these overseas public servants visit Korea, they really want to learn about our experience, and maybe we need to build content where we could provide very systemized explanation to these overseas public servants about our history. Thank you very much. So maybe we could develop more content to these overseas public servants when they visit Korea. Next to Mr. Zhang. So due to the pandemic, we had to take trainings online. In KOICA, we doubted that online trainings could be more effective than offline trainings. And we have found out that, offline training courses were far more effective. So, of course, we need to transfer our knowledge, but it's very important that they have hands-on experience by visiting Korea to see the country by themselves. Secondly, not just KOICA, but there are many other institutions. KOICA actually invite more than 10,000 public servants a year, and there are so many different programs. And we work with professional training institutions in Korea too. In the past, one of the dissatisfaction I had was that these programs were too lecture-oriented, and these programs were too focused on transferring knowledge of Korean experiences. So at the end of these training programs, when we do a survey, we analyze the results of the survey and incorporate the feedback to the programs in the future. And my recent impressions of the programs of KOICA is that there has been a huge improvement. We actually find out what they want to learn from these programs. So not just that we are providing one-way kind of education training program to these public servants, we actually incorporate their needs to our program. Second, other than lectures, we offer them on-site visits. And for example, if there is a subject about increasing trade, not just listening to lecture is important, but also we provide opportunities for them to visit local institutions and provide one-to-one meeting with our local government agencies. Sometimes these overseas public servants want to meet our IT companies. For example, let's say if a IT company in Korea go to Korea, they go to their countries. These companies want to find out how they can expand networks. So this could be a kind of win-win, mutual beneficial strategies where both sides can learn from each other. Sometimes these public servants designate particular companies that they want to visit in Korea. One dissatisfaction I have is that this is a too short-term training. And of course, there is a constraint on these trainings. If you look at the States, for example, these training programs are conducted in graduate schools. And then they receive the degree from these schools and they go back to their countries. So maybe we could extend this to master's and PhD programs to these overseas public servants. But the problem is that we need money. This is very costly. So probably Ministry of Economy and Finance could provide more financial support to this. By doing that, I think these programs can be more sustainable. Thank you very much for your comment. So online trainings, of course, had to be done because we had the pandemic. But nevertheless, visiting Korea due to seeing is believing is far more effective. There are about 300 different programs ran and operated by KOICA, and also these programs are entrusted to other local institutions and focus too much on short-term training programs. So the effects could be low, to be somewhat less than what we expected. So other than having a very short-term period of training programs, maybe we could concentrate on particular agenda and extend these programs to a long-term project. For example, maybe work with graduate schools in the States where this could be turned into a PhD program where we can nurture the talents. We have KDI, Public Administration Graduate School, and there is a master program supported by KOICA for the KDI. Yes, I think we just have 5 minutes left. Maybe we can open up to the floor. And before I ask a question about the role of KIPA in this area, are there any questions from the floor? For example, the turnover that we should take, improvements that we can make for the current programs we have. Any questions, comments from the floor? None? Yes, we have one from the floor. I am Lee Yoon from Personnel Administration Agency. I just want to ask a tip. So we are talking about the importance of strengthening capabilities of public servants. And I have listened very carefully to your discussion, and this has been very useful and fruitful. The question I have is that this is very important in ODA, but many ODA projects are done for these ODA, for these infra, for example, visible kind of projects. And I want to build a discourse about the importance of strengthening capabilities of public servants. How can we make that kind of discourse? Maybe anyone from the panelists who can answer the question? I cannot give you a clear answer, but your agency too doesn't have huge experience in doing ODA. But we have the ODA committee, we have the ODA working group, we have the Office for Government Policy Coordination. So the topics that we discussed today and the content that we discussed today could be raised to the Office for Government Policy Coordination and then could be expanded from then. And my answer too is not a right answer, but in the public administration area where we provide support to recipient countries, it is a chance for us to promote our country to these recipient countries. But what we need right now is that we are experiencing low fertility and aging society. And we actually have to live together with the people from these recipient countries. So human exchange is very important. We need to provide a vision to the people in these recipient countries where we have a future together. By doing that, maybe ODA doesn't have a direct relevance, but by doing all these activities, we are promoting our country to these recipient countries, and we're providing a vision to these countries where we can make a future together. I'm not sure whether this could be useful to your question. Up till now, we have been talking for 80 minutes. So the conclusion comes to this. As a donor country, in strengthening capabilities of public servants, what role can the KIPA play or other national research institutions of NRC can play in strengthening capabilities of public servants? Because they are national research institutions, of course, they only do the research, but because we have the KIPA today, what role should the KIPA play in strengthening capabilities of public servants in this area? So I think we are running out of time. So we have 5 minutes. So please keep it brief.
Well, we are behind schedule, so let me make my comments very briefly. So, KIPA, what can it do? I think most urgent is the following. So we have the peer review, and I went into a closed meeting for the peer review. There were many questions, and I thought there are some very urgent tasks, which was already mentioned by former Ambassador Huang. So we have a huge increase in the budget next year. So how are we going to increase the manpower? How are we going to train the new people? If we don't have a clear blueprint about that, I'm not sure how we're going to well execute next year's budget. If we have more money but just the same number of people, then it will be a huge burden on the existing people. So we might run into problems. So at KIPA, maybe you can come up with some great ideas by doing a short-term project. Also, we have increased budget, and in relation to that, it's 6.5 trillion won. And it's much larger than the Ministry of Gender Equality, for example. And so, of course, we have the different organizations, they have different uniqueness and they have different strength. But maybe we should have a central agency, and so maybe there should be some reorganization, and maybe KIPA can give us some great ideas about how to centralize and reorganize. And Yes, great comments were made by Mr. Ryunju Lee. So make a training hub in the university of the partnering nations. So maybe we can work on that, on these centers. And I think building such a consortium, I don't think KOICA can do this alone. So that will have to be outsourced. So KIPA will have to do some research projects on that as well. Just two things. First, KIPA basically engages in research. And in the research area, I would like to ask for the following. So as we carry out KOICA projects, a lot of it is rather unilateral. And so we don't really ask or consider the conditions of the partnering nations, and we just try to teach them lessons, saying, this was our experience, it worked for us, these are the great lessons, and you should learn them. So it was rather one-sided. And so I think we have to work on better contents, thinking about the environment in the partnering nations. And so research is important at KIPA, but it's about 70%, and I think 30% has to do with execution. And there will be experience coming from the actual implementation and execution. And Dr. Lee is working on this center, and perhaps we can focus our efforts around the center. And so maybe KIPA can come up with contents regarding governance, and then they can get some great feedback by assessing the effectiveness. So I think those are the roles that KIPA can play. I have two things to mention. So first, we have public administration area, and we have experience there going back from the 1960s and forward. And I think KIPA has the capability to make use of that experience. And also in ODA, what is most important is to discover the right project for the partnering nations. And of course, we have development needs of the different nations, and then we have the strength of Korea, and we have to match the needs of the partnering nations and the capabilities of Korea. And these great projects, the right match, can be proposed by KIPA. And we must focus and center around the needs of the partnering nations. And by doing that, I think KIPA can really specialize in this area. Well, regarding this question, yes, I'm going last. And the three who went before me actually said everything that I wanted to say, and I really have nothing more to add, so I think I will just close here. Yes, thank you very much. So the panelists here, they are quite distinguished people in their respective areas, and I think 1 hour and a half was not enough to gather all their insights, and I know that they had to make their comments brief. So I was moderating this session, and I learned a lot. I'm sure the people in the audience learned a lot as well. Now, this session, it is not just a round table. I believe that this session is a very important milestone as for the future direction that KIPA should pursue. And of course, we have several public servants here, and we have people from the Ministry of Personnel Management, and I'm very motivated that the Korean government officials are very much interested in this topic. And I believe that we will have further development of all the know-how that we have through this session. So I would like to thank Dr. Do-seok Lee, and I want to thank all the staff members for making this session possible. So on that note, we will now wrap up this session. Thank you. So once again, I would like to ask you to give a big round of applause to all the contributors of this session. So that was part 1, and we will break for coffee until 1:30, and then we will begin session 2. And we will have a photo session of the contributors. Thank you.
밖에 커피와 다가가 준비되어 있습니다. 예, 커피 브레이크를 가지시.